So I've got my Scrappy sketchbook ready to draw some of the seeds we've been growing. And we've got our pumpkin seeds here, grown in just a plastic, again recycling, they're grown in a plastic food box. And already this has holes in, so that makes it ideal. Or sometimes we use the sort of mushroom containers, which we just make holes in the bottom to let the water out of. And things seem to grow really well in them. So the pumpkin, if I just ease one out, this is a seed we collected from one we grew last year. And it's just it's always wonderful when you see that moment where the roots have come down and then the little shoots come up and the pumpkin seed is still on top, like a little hat sat on top of those two first leaves that are about to unfurl. So it'll be great to capture that stage. And then this one as well, with again that little hat of that thin little pumpkin seed on top. And then I'll show as they open more, and then as they start to get their secondary leaves. So I'm going to use the tea box because I think that will be perfect with the different flaps. I can draw each stage on a different flap within the sides of the tea box. And this has literally just been tied in with a ribbon from a Christmas cracker, with that through the tab there and tied onto the hair bobble. With Monty's sketchbook, we use this mint tea box where he's been drawing the different types of mint, the purple spearmint, the soft cat mint, and some of the green of the common mint in his own interpretations. And we just folded this around the elastic band, so just put one side of the tea box on that side of the band and the rest on the other, and then it just nicely folds up and around within his little sketchbook. So I'm going to start for my pumpkin seeds using a brush pen, or you could use a felt tip pen. And any colour really, I'm going for brown because of the sort of brown of the seed case, but you could of course use a green felt tip pen if you've got quite a natural soft colour. Or any yellow even, although yellow, the lighter colours don't show up quite so well. So this sepia pen, and I'll just start with the little seed case here. So let's have a look at which angle I want to draw it from. Which view. So I think I'll draw it sort of maybe there from the side, showing that little case is like a little mouth almost that the seeds are emerging from. So I'm just going to start with the seed itself. Putting where there's more shadow, I'm making a slightly thicker line. And then just going round with a slightly lighter line, just getting that shape. So I say it's looking, there's like a little triangle in there where the leaves are coming out. And then the seed curves around here. And then we've got this nice little wave of the leaf case there, the two leaflets, those little young leaves, just coming out. And the felt tip pen or brush pen does give you a really good solid mark, but you don't need to have a completely solid line. So on the lighter side of the sheet I can make it more of a broken line, and on the side that's slightly darker, that's in shadow, I can make it slightly stronger. And then we can go down and literally for all those fine roots I can just flick, and if you flick with your brush, your pen, you find you get a nice finer point at the end. So although you could start with a more defined line and then flick outwards, it gives that little fine point. And a lot of the root hairs are sort of twined around and wiggling, so you can enjoy doing some nice sort of wiggly lines. And if you hold the pen very lightly and apply less pressure, then you start to get the sort of lighter, finer lines for those very small hairs. If you apply more pressure, you'll get a more defined mark. And I might just add in a little bit of a stronger line there in that shadow just between the two leaves. And then you could do a little bit of a curving line on the seed just to give that little bit of shading at the bottom of the seed. And on the stem, if you want to, you could do little curving lines coming out from the side of the stem, just to give a little bit of shadow. in there. And on the leaf as well, as it goes into the seed, you get a little bit of shadow cast from the seed onto the outside. So I can just add a few little, again, curving lines to give the sense of the leaf curving round. And that, hopefully you can see, just gives it a little bit more depth and volume. So on to the next one. I can now, oh, look at those lovely roots, like a little creature sort of walking along the page there with all its legs. And when you start drawing seeds and plants, you realise quite how dynamic they are. Now I want to draw this flat like that so I can really see the little hat of the seed on top. And I'll start with the seed, and you can do quickly, just do little dots to start with when working in pen, because you can't rub out, but that's a good thing because you just work with the marks you make. You can always kind of slightly draw over it and adjust things still, but I find putting little dots in helps to make sure I can fit it all on the page and it's not going to be too much. And actually I've changed my mind here, because I think what would be nice would be to put this one at the bottom, so we've got sort of the 2 stages, and then this long panel I can put the taller plant that opens up from the seed, so I can make that into a leaf. So even with pen, if you start just with dots mapping out your composition, you can still, mapping out where you're putting things, you can still adjust them. So I can put my little dots in for where my leaf's going and the stem, and then the roots can nicely come out down onto this tab down here. And then it's like join the dots then. You literally just join the dots around, putting in a little bit. So I'm starting on the shaded edge and then curving round my pen and then keeping it lighter. So if I hold it, just use the very tip of the pen. So you can get different marks. So I can use the pen on its side, will give me a broader mark, a wider mark. And I can use the pen, hold it vertically, hold it upright, and use the very tip of the pen, will give me finer lines to put some of those veins in the leaf. And then again, just a little bit of shading for the stem. And I could add coloured, colour this in with coloured felt tip pens, or coloured pens or pencil or paint afterwards. But for now I'm just drawing the form, and again for the roots, trying to get those wiggles and those interesting shapes of the roots there, like fingers or feet coming out from the plant. And it might be on some of the wider the roots, you do a little bit of shading as well. Little flicked lines. Or even little dots, little stipples dabbing up and down. Start to sound like you're a woodpecker. So I've got just captured my 2 squash seeds. Again, I could put my pumpkin seeds. I could put a little bit of shading as the leaf goes into the seed, and then curve that around. And now, time to go in, we'll plant that one back in the soil before it dries out. And then I've got these that you can really start to see the leaves have unfurled, they've opened, they've lost their seed case. And you've just got the sign of those secondary leaves, the adult leaves showing in the middle. So I'm going to use this panel, and I might do have one leaf. If we turn that around, I can make this into a nice big leaf. Just keeping a flick around for the lighter side, and these lines I did that I changed my mind with, that was going to be the seed, I can just use that to make the veins on the leaf as it curves around there. And then here we can do the wiggling, just sort of wiggling along to get that more zigzag edge to the adult leaves that are emerging in the middle. And because they're coming out from inside the leaf, it's casting a shadow on that outer leaf. So I can just brush out with my pen. Using a brush pen or a felt tip pen is a little bit like painting, because you can use it on its side and literally use it like a brush. It is harder to get sort of more lighter lines, but it's good for creating nice bold pictures with strong marks and shadows. So this leaf sort of comes around there. And then we can have the outer leaf just sweeping around, and it's curving over. There's a little bit of shadow, so to give that feeling of that leaf curving around, again I can do curved marks using my pen on its side and just curving it around, following the curve of the leaf. And this edge is lighter as the sunshine is catching it. And then we can just see the stalk. And if I keep the stalk, I need to add a little bit of shading on the stalk as well. And I don't need to draw both lines, both sides of the stalk, because if I just curve some of my shadows round in a few places to where the stalk would end, it gives me an edge. And sometimes not having a solid line on an edge gives a greater feeling of a volume of this curving around. A solid line all the way out line can tend to flatten things. So I've got my squash there, and I might do another one here, again with the sort of leaves curving round. And then this panel I can draw the full plant. And then here I think I'll put my pumpkin as we actually get the pumpkin from the plant. So yeah, I'll use these two panels to draw the pumpkin plant as it gets bigger, and this one will draw the actual pumpkin. And then we're showing its whole life cycle. And I could even actually up here, we've got one of those little pumpkin seeds. We'll start back again this time next year with planting those pumpkin seeds. And you should, any pumpkin you buy at Halloween, you should be able to save the seeds before if you cook it. Save the seeds, and then you can plant them and grow your own pumpkins for next year. So I've used my brush pen or my felt tip pen for this one. Now I'm going to just move to a biro, which again you can get really nice finer lines and a little bit more detail. So I'm going to use that for my smaller pea seeds. And it's not, you can see it's not as green as the peas we eat, the peas that are produced from these plants, but the dried peas that we saved from some of the pea pods, Monty and I planted, and he loves pipping them into the pots. And we've just got that pea still attached, and then the roots come out and the shoot has come up. So that would be really nice to draw on the pea packet that the pea seeds came from. So I'll just place that there, and again I could do some dots just to mark where the root's going and where the leaves are going. And then draw the seed with that little split in where the roots have come out. And with the biro you can press really lightly to get quite a pale, and hopefully you can still see it, but just get quite a pale outline to start with. And it's always good to have it. You can see I'm holding the pen quite lightly and I'm not applying much pressure at all. I'm just very gently making marks on the paper. So this is just a very pale outline sketch. Just very lightly marking on the paper where the shoot comes out and the root comes out. So starting with it very light to get the shape, and then because it is pale I can always adjust things if I want to. And then I can go in and looking at the side that's in shadow, I can make that slightly darker by applying more pressure. But rather than just having an outline, I am doing little curves again to give that rounded form. Hello, Cornelius. That was a cockerel. Saying good morning to everyone. Waiting for his breakfast. And then with the pea, I can just curve that around. Again, for the pea pod, it's quite smooth and shiny. So I want quite smooth, soft marks. So I can even use my pen again at a shallow angle, slightly on its side, and that will give me a lighter mark because less ink flows through the pen. So I can get a lighter line. And then I can increase the angle and get more pressure where I want a darker line. And that will help to give that sense of the roundness of the pea seed. And then for the roots, again, I might put a little bit of shading, almost zigzagging up and down to give some shading on that main root. And then the little fine roots, I can just flick. And you can see you get a much finer mark with the biro. Just flicking around and wiggling, flick and wiggle to get those fine root hairs curving around. And then the leaf has got a paler vein down the middle and a little bit of shading. So I'm just going to shade around and just put in a little bit of shading there. Again, curving it around to capture that curved shape of the leaf. And we've got this lovely little leaf here. I could just put a little bit of shading at the bottom to show that it's coming out from that stem. And we've already got some little tendrils coming out which the peas use to climb up things. So if you grow them, it's good to put a frame of some sticks for them to grow up. And they attach onto them with their tendrils. So I can just curve this. Again, curving my lines around, pressing very lightly to give me a mid-tone, a lighter shade. And then you can see, hopefully as I apply more pressure, I'm getting a slightly darker, stronger shade. And that helps to give a little bit of depth and volume to the pea plant. And hopefully you can start to see that coming to life on the page. It's nice when you put those darker shadows in. It gives that depth to the plant. So that's that exciting moment as the shoot starts to emerge from the pea and those leaves come up. And then we've got some here that need to be planted out where we've also got a little flower emerging. So very pale white flowers. And if that flower is then pollinated by a bee, we'll then get our peas, which are really tasty to eat. So, and you can see these outer sepals, again like a little hat over the pea. So that will be nice to draw the different stages. So I'm going to start with the flower. Get it in a good position to draw. And then I can, oh yes, there we've got the flower and the pea. So I can start with the little, and for the white flower, so I want to keep it fairly pale, but still add a little bit of shadow at the bottom as it curves down. And the sepals cast a little bit of shadow. The sepals are almost like a kind of leaf around the outside, or a kind of sort of additional petals that protect the flower before it opens. So we can add in those sepals and the little pea flower. And you can see how with biro you can use it very lightly and just sort of lightly scribble up and down to give it just a little bit of shadow, or pressing much more firmly to get a darker shadow. And I can just lightly draw the outline of that leaf. And again, curve around to add in some shadow on the underside of the leaf. And then we can do our slightly zigzag edge. And these little tendrils that we saw just starting to emerge on our pea here, they're curling round, all curly. And they're lovely how they twizzle around as they grow around the pea shoots. as the peas climb up, because they're climbing plants. So I could just do an outline really for some of these leaves, applying a stronger mark, applying more pressure in the areas of shadow, and just slightly lighter in the areas of highlight. And then I can put my pea in my actual pea pod, curving round here. And even put the suggestion that you can just often start to see the little peas emerging inside the pea pod. So I can just start to put those peas inside. And the remnants of the flower at the end. After the flowers sort of faded and often fallen off or dried up, you then get these wonderful bright green pea pods emerging, which Monty gets very excited about, and especially eating them. We can just put in a little bit of shadow on that stem, because that will help to, again, give it a little bit of volume so it doesn't look too flat. And then I've got my root, my stem just coming down here, and then some leaves. And again, I can do very light little bit of shading on one side and more shadow on the other. And another little twizzly wizzly tendril coming off. So that's my quick sketch on the pea packet, showing the stages of the pea emerging, and then the flower and the seeds. And it's lovely to show that, again, that life cycle of the plant, all the different stages. And of course, if we let this pea pod dry once the peas are developed, we can save them and plant them again to produce more pea plants. And just using the biro, which is really lovely, sort of quite a quick, fairly quick way of sketching, and also enjoying that shading with it, it can actually create much more subtle, delicate marks and lines and some lovely detailed drawing, more than you'd perhaps think. So now what shall we sketch next? We have got our broad beans, and certainly one of the quickest methods to sketch with is charcoal. So I might do a quick sketch on this envelope of our broad beans, which are just starting to emerge. And again, it's always exciting when you see that bean with the shoot just coming out that's going to develop into the roots and into leaves. And to get that rounded, and they're quite smooth broad beans, so I can curve around with my charcoal, just put that darker edge of the shadow of the bean, and then use my finger, if you don't mind getting messy, just smudging around with the charcoal. And then draw the shaded side of the shoot. And again, little curving, just using that very pointed edge of the charcoal, or the tip of the charcoal pencil if you're using a pencil. And just blend it around. And I can very lightly with my finger just smudge that. And then put in the other side of the bean there, keeping that quite light. And there's our broad bean just emerging from its bean case. With charcoal, you do need to fix it, otherwise it will smudge. So I could use just water with a brush and just brush over water over the top very lightly, and that can be an effective way as long as you're quite gentle and use quite a soft brush. That could be a good way of just quickly fixing the charcoal. And charcoal, I've smoothed it there with my finger, but it's also great for adding texture. And these lovely nasturtiums, which have the beautiful bright orange flowers and yellow flowers, and you can eat everything in the nasturtium. You can eat the leaves, the seeds, all of them. So I could use the charcoal to just draw my nasturtiums, and I'm going to use this printed old sort of scrap paper we got some paint on, because the greens on the scrap paper are ideal for the leaves of the nasturtiums. So I'll start with the seed in the charcoal, and it's quite a bumpy ridged seed, so I'm going to wiggle my charcoal deliberately to get that rougher texture of the nasturtium seed, in contrast to the smoother texture of the bean seed. And then I can bring that up and wiggle that around. And just using the charcoal on its side and drawing up, flicking up, I can put some of those nasturtium leaves in. And I might, because they're edged in red, they've got quite a red edge, I'm just going to go around with some coloured crayon, wax crayon or oil pastel, just to capture that red outline, and that will also help to define. And I'm actually using some of the shapes we've got in the ink already to help to create the shape of the nasturtium leaves. So just using a little bit of purple and a little bit of red crayon to emphasize the shape, and working with those marks that are already on the paper there to put in my leaves. And then I can add a little bit more, a few more stems in there, and I've got my nasturtiums. And actually, looking at the roots of plants, if we tip these beetroot out, you can see they've got really purple roots, wonderful pinks and purples in there. So what I'm going to do with this section where I stuck that window on, that could become my seed tray, and I could draw the beetroot leaves on top, but I can use my red and purple to capture all those fine roots coming down through the pot, and that's going to be quite fun to do. And again, varying it, so maybe for some of the roots that are wider near the top, I can do a thicker line and then just use the very edge of the crayon and building up a few layers of colour, because some are more pink, some are more purple, so I can add in some little fine purple lines there, and maybe a little bit of a lilac colour. You can layer, if you've got just the 3 primary colours, you could use red and add in a little bit of blue over the top to create purple, or you could use red and then a little bit of yellow over the top to give an orange line. And then out the top of the pot I can do my stems. The veins down the middle of the leaves are very red, and then I can just use my pastel, my crayon on its side, just to give that slight fuzzy haze across of red and purple on those beetroot leaves. And I've already got some green on the paper, which is good because I can use that. You could of course rub some green very lightly over the top as well to get the right colours. And I've got this label hanging out in my Scrappy sketchbook, and we found this really interesting hazelnut that started to send out shoots and roots from the top. So you can see how the hazelnut has just split and we've got those roots coming up. So I might just finish off with my brush pen again, or felt tip pen, or maybe using a finer pen. This is a sepia drawing pen, but again you could use a biro, just using it on its side, applying more pressure on the top for the darker edge, and then just very lightly flicking around for the lighter edge of the seed. And again, slightly thicker line for the thicker roots and very fine for those fine tips. So hopefully that's given you a few ideas to get your Scrappy sketchbook out and start sketching and trying different drawing materials as well. So have some fun and